Hello everyone, I hope you are well. This is going to be hopefully a quick video. I say that in my terms, it's probably not quick for you guys. When should you use key switches versus when should you just have another version of the same track but playing your other articulation, your other playing style? Some real reasons why you might want to use one over the other. And yeah, I'll show you using quite a complex kind of top end plugin, the pros and the cons of each, and then give you some examples as well, hopefully. My key cam isn't working today, so I'm going to not play anything too exciting. It's just going to be some A minors and things like that. Really nothing exciting. So you don't need to see what my hands are doing, although I'm doing lots of waving at the moment. But yeah, I'll go through all of that stuff. So if you completely not got a clue, what on earth is articulations? What is key switching? And what on earth are you talking about? Might genuinely be a first question. So let's delve in. I'll try and keep this as interactive and entertaining as possible. So if I'm opening up a project here, this is a template. I've got all the things that I like to use, 119 different things in this template, yeah. But loads of my instruments that I'm really a fan of using here. And if I was to load up and play, I'm going to do this within the door, just so you can see. So I'm going to do like A minor, just a nice little one note at a time. Will eventually load through, I promise. Very quiet. Let me see why that is. There we go. This is incredibly exciting, I assure you. But okay, so this is just how it's going to go. Gorgeous, absolutely awful sound. I appreciate that. But so that style is legato. So, oops, get rid of my synth. That's how it goes, right? Let me just change it so I'm on. Very laggy on the MIDI, not sure why. But yeah, so that's kind of where we're up to, is you have a legato instrument, so it's playing all the notes in a very smooth, they're all connected. So if this was a synth, I'm just going to swap over to my synth for a second. But if I was playing a synth, you can make them, you've got monophonic and polyphonic. Polyphonic, you're playing multiple notes at once. Christ, that was loud. Polyphonic, you're playing multiple notes at once. God, that's still really loud. Oh, God. Polyphonic, you're playing lots of notes at once. Yeah, pretty loud, sorry. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. He was playing something legato. All the notes connect together, so they kind of glide one to the other. So example of this, just doing an A minor scale. So incredibly exciting, I know. Now, if I try and play more than one note at a time, listen to this. Because what the synth is doing is it's saying, hey, you've told me I can only play one note at a time. It's really important to understand this, and so many different instruments have physical limitations. So they fundamentally change how an instrument's played. Every single note and every way that you can play an instrument is driven by different things in terms of techniques and styles, and to be able to capture them in a live performance, or not necessarily a live performance, but a virtual MIDI performance such as this, it's difficult. So I've got Cinebrass desk and horn here. Let me go full screen so you can see what's going on with it. Not really that much to explain, really. It's just a lovely... Now, hear how it's doing that? Just like my monophonic synth presets. You wouldn't really do that with a brass instrument. You can do a little bit, like some multi-tonguing and stuff, but it's not really very realistic. Sounds much better. Okay, so that's legato. Now, I have this instrument here, which, let me click on it. I'm going to have to zoom this in post, so I'll try not to kind of do anything too dramatic, but I can't actually change how this instrument plays, full stop. It's really important to use as a first example, because it's all great talking about key switching and articulations versus, like, you know, key switch mapping and all this stuff, but some pieces of software you cannot do it full stop, and you are locked into going down one route versus the other. All right, so I can't look at changing mapping preset, add articulation. To be honest, I could probably play about and make it happen, but I've not got the time or the patience, I'll be honest. So if I wanted to get now a staccato quick version of this, I'd have to either do a separate track or a separate instrument, like within this VST library here. So now if I did that, I'm going to be playing legato and staccato patches together. This may be teaching some of you to suck eggs, but I'm really keen to actually show people who don't have a clue what that might mean. So let me find it in here, wherever it's gone. Descant horn. Probably not going to be called that. Sorry if I'm butchering someone's language. Right, so here's the two together. Oops, it's not playing both together. That would be handy. Okay, let me solo it then. So here is your staccato patch. Okay. It's not working at all, that, because your inputs, in one sense it's saying, right, I'm going to play these nice monophonic, one note at a time, even if you play multiple. It's doing this lovely sweeping motion. Staccato's not for that live. It's more for you playing all those notes at once. So something to note there. You may already be locked in, depending on what type of instruments you're using, down a particular path. All right. So first thing to note. So whilst we're on that, then, okay, I want the horn to do a lovely legato section. So it might be, you know, like that line I just played, but then it then goes into some type of lovely, you know, fast section. The only way around it in this instance is to make a separate version of the track. So I duplicate the track, like so. I would then call this desk horn legato or long or whatever you want to call it. And then this one I will call staccato. Yeah. Or short. You know, if you're not super musically termed. I'm not either. I've just been kind of told off so many times that I now force myself to use these terms. So now I've got really short and then really long. Okay, so I'm going to very quickly just play something in. I'm not, you know what, I'm just going to play something. I'm not bothered about. Okay, now let's pretend I've just had to, that's just an actual one horn playing that. Okay, let's pretend it's going to evolve into something majestic. First problem we've encountered with using articulations, although this is a problem of key switching as well, to be fair. Let me go full cam on this one. First issue you will always have, whether you're key switching or not, is going to be balancing. So you're always going to have this issue because the way the samples are played, they're at different volumes. So this is at pretty decent level versus the other bits. Weirdly, it's got better since I've stopped recording. I have no idea what's going on there, but so sometimes what you run into then is, well, if you do need to change the velocity and like the how loud that is, when it's separated on a separate track because it's a different articulation, well, guess what you can do? You can just go and grab your let's jump in there. I was trying to be lazy, but yeah, so you'd bring the other section down. Try not to boost stuff where possible. But yeah, I get a bit lazy sometimes. Apologies. There we are. Really basics, nothing exciting. Appreciate. So if you had a key switch, instead what you would do is, were these two, let's go full screen on that. There we are. So this basically starts, oops, when that does here. I'm not going to replay that, but then as it hits this, it would start playing. But what would happen is before this note ends here, before that note starts, you would press a button or some type of key, which would then say to the software, hey, I need you to change articulation now. I'm going to try and demonstrate that now using, hopefully the BBC plugin has spent some time loading now. So if I move all this onto the BBC one below, let's have a quick play through that. Much better. It tries. The BBC one's very good. It kind of mixes legato and staccato samples. But instead of doing that, let me show you exactly what I meant. Here, you got legato, long, staccatissimo, marcato. I'm going to switch it to this. So there's 3 ways of doing this. I'm only going to show you 2. And the other way I will show you in another video. Yeah. So I'm going to glue these together. And somewhere here, I'm going to unquantize, just so I can free notes. The note to press was C or D minus 1, I think it was. So I'll just do a very quick 32-bit note here. And then what should happen, it may not quite load the right one. No, it was a D1. So if I change to legato, yeah, it's going to change from, watch this here. Of course, I pressed the wrong key. This is the first thing to learn. What it says is D minus 1 on that key switch. It's actually D minus 2. One of the frustrating things I've learned with certain plugins is because it's not, there you go, see how it's changed? So let's play that, just that little section there. Swapped over. One more time. Sorry, let's change it to, let's do a long flutter. This will sound weird. Yeah. Now, let's swap into this. What is the point? Someone may ask. There's obviously an advantage for one way versus the other. There is, however, there's things to consider. So, with the key switching, if I ever had a successful track and I decided, you know what, I need to now export all this MIDI into an actual musical score and do all sorts of, like scoring with it. If you've got stuff split across 4 different tracks for the same line, so yeah, musical score for those who haven't seen one. If I was splitting something across 4 different instruments, and then, I'm looking at going to a professional musician and saying, hi, I really would love you to play this part for me, and, we can collaborate, whatever, they're going to expect me to send something over. If it's 3 separate sheets of music, it's going to be like, whoa. So that's where you then probably transcribe it all into one piece, which in essence, if that's your end goal, you're probably setting yourself up a little bit more work than you should need to in the first place, because essentially what you're going to be doing is, if I try and show score editor, you'll end up with a more complex looking staff like this, you see? So it's kind of like staff 1, staff 2. It should be more stave. Apologies for those grammar folks in the comments, let me know. But yeah, staff 1, staff 2. And you're then like, oh, right, so is this playing? Is it not playing? If it's all on 1, that's what, they expect to see. Doesn't mean for any moment that articulations are then poor, because actually they're my preferred way for a lot of different reasons. But it's just something to consider. If that's something you end up doing, you're going to have to do a little bit more work to then probably chop and get all those pieces of MIDI, put them all on one track, and then just call it, like bassline, not bassline, horn line, sorry, and then just export it as that. All right. Now, with the articulation side, both key switching and articulations are affected by your CPU and your RAM. I'm very fortunate that I have a decent enough job outside of work, outside of what I do here. This is all for fun and just because I love doing what I do, making music. But I have a very good computer, which I've only just bought, all right? 84.2 gig of RAM this is using. Let me zoom that in, sorry. So you can see here, 84.2 gig of RAM. And that is for about 20 orchestral instruments. Don't get me wrong, it's Spitfire BBC Pro version, which is notoriously unoptimized and some other bits. But if you're really stuck with the amount of RAM you've got, or your CPU's a little bit older, or your disk space, or wherever, you can't afford to have 5 different versions of a trumpet that has legato, staccato, marcato. The way you get around it, whilst I kind of go into waffle mode, apologies, but the way to get around it is you either play the parts, render it to audio, change it over to like different articulation, record again, render it to audio, etc., etc. Very faffy. Or you use Keyswitches, or you get a better system if that's what you want to do, and you just want to basically be able to grab all your instruments like I'm about to do here, and then just play like, right? You've got to compromise somewhere. For me, I've compromised with my wallet. You don't need to have a top-end system to do it, but you're going to need to compromise. Articulations aren't budget-friendly in that way. You can make them work, as I said, by exporting it as audio and doing all these other different things, disabling tracks when they're not in use. Top tip, if you don't do that, really important. But yeah, key switching them is like the more economical approach, because you might only then have 8 tracks instead of having, 40 tracks with all those articulations. Most people, to be honest, tend to have they'll have a long version of a track, or an instrument, sorry, a long articulation, a short one, and then depending on who you are and what you're doing, you may have then a third one that's either like something really specific or, I tend to have 3. I've got a long a short, and then a kind of like pizzicato, because I really love the sound of plucked strings and stuff. The other thing with key switching, then, it seems I'm trying to keep it very balanced and unbiased where possible. You might be like, so which one's better? There isn't really an answer. For me personally, I prefer articulations because I find it just less faff. But then if I do ever end up having to export something for an actual musician, I'm going to have to do quite a bit of work then to kind of stitch all that stuff together into one lovely piece of sheet music and just present it then. Doesn't sound like a bad or that much of a big deal if you think of it when it's like you're really asking one person. But normally, like with these big orchestral templates, it might actually be for a genuine orchestra. And, you know, the whole point of what we do as composers and artists and things is if you're getting into the realms of orchestral sampling and you're actually orchestrating, you might genuinely have 24 different lines of brass and strings and who knows what else, woodwind, etc., that you're writing. And so if that's the case, and then you've got 5 of each, because you're doing, you know, staccato, and then actually, well, I need the horns to play, this one to play a C, that one to play a D, that one to play an E, so you've got, you know, like a sus4 chord split across like an orchestra. You've just made a colossal piece of work for yourself. Very, very few people are going to have that problem. But if you're going down the articulation approach, and you have massive templates like this, you might actually be one of those people that runs into that issue. So that's where key switching has its advantage. What's the problem with key switching? Well, as I went through before, not every piece of software has the same key switches. So I'm very fortunate in the fact that BBC Symphony Orchestra, the key switches are pretty much the same across most of the instrument packs. So if you hit D2, well, it's D-2, then it's always going to change it to staccato for most of the patches. Okay. The other thing then is D-2 doesn't really exist in the musical world. So for Spitfire, that's what they've picked, because if you're on an 88 key keyboard and you're playing those really low notes, you know, you don't want to accidentally swap the patch over. On that exact note, though, I'll show you my biggest bugbear with combining different samples. So I've got quite a lot of native instruments stuff. I've got plugins from all over the place. Let's go into desktop then. So this is a multi-mic'd, quite a complex quartet thing. So C0 affects this violin going into virtuoso. E0 changes it to staccato. Okay, what about the other instruments in that? It's E1 in the one below it. Okay, what about the one below that? That's E1. Okay, and what about the next one? That's E1. So 3 of these instruments will play nicely together. The others won't. So if I start playing something, I've just lost one. Sounds still decent, but I've lost one of my instruments. So you need to be really, really, really careful with the key switches and know where they all are. I've got like a big notepad. All my top plugins, here's where the key switches are. You can reprogram them, of course. So, you know, if you want that to be more matching something else, you can go in and change, you know, key switch just at the top up here, you know, and change that to either a note input or something else. That's the other thing I found with key switching, is they will always say, oh, what, just press a note you want it to change to. A lot of the time, you don't want to press a note. You want the note to sit somewhere else, and that's why Spitfire has it as like a negative notes. My personal suggestion is, if you're going to use key switches, is either use, depends what keyboard you've got. If you've got an 88 key, absolutely use the lowest octave or the top octave, unless you really need to use it. If you're using some type of synth, where you're like 66 keys, 48 or 44, sorry, and you're changing octaves, you can make it so that whatever that lowest octave is, so on my wave 2 there, it's a 66, but I can go 2 octaves down. that will then put you in your key switch territory. But you have to know what the key switches are, what instruments are being affected to really get the most out of it. And it takes time. So yeah, something to kind of consider there. I think, hopefully, I've covered everything. I will try and summarize, if I've not already, 2 completely different use scenarios. And I think you've got quite a light system, or you're going to be exporting stuff out of your DAW and turning it into sheet music, and you don't want to have to then stitch together multiple lines of MIDI into actual score, key switching is probably the way to go, with the caveat of it takes some time to learn and set up for your particular plugins. It may not always correspond and kind of be on the same wavelength as your other programs or plugins. But as you said, you'll save yourself that headroom on your CPU and all that stuff in the future. All right. Articulations, much more plug and play. So you can kind of just go, right, click one track, record your line in, swap back into another line, off you go again. Much more plug and play. A lot of the times, much more CPU and memory intensive. When you get to some of these like top end professional plugins, like the BBC Professional Orchestra one, this template that I've got here is about 84 gig because it's got multi-mics and all sorts on it. If I went and had more variations of those instruments, I'm probably easily going to hit 190 something gig, to be honest, which is ridiculous, but that's just one plugin as an example. If you then need to export some type of MIDI out for like sheet music and stuff, you're then going to have to stitch it together. You might not, but more often than not in a professional setting, you probably would. And before I wrap up, I would like to show something else that you can do. I have very recently acquired a lovely Stream Deck. Not sponsored. Is it actually trying to zoom in on that? Oops, apologies. So I've created a little button here. Sorry. I've created a little button here that says Articulation Keyswitches, and it's got BBC Symphony Orchestra. So if I click that here, I then appreciate it's going to be impossible to read. I'll try and keep this zoomed in if I can keep it somewhat steady. I've pre-mapped all my key switches for Spitfire in here. So I can just click strings, and here's all my key switches. And what's really cool, I'll see if I can capture this live for you, is we're on legato currently, so if I go and press long, I've not got the, I need to change the MIDI input. Let's try again. Change the long. You see that? So if you look, as I press here on long, look to the right side of the screen. It's changing my articulations for me. Took ages to set that up. I've seen other people do it and just replicated it on Windows using like mostly my own stuff, but I had to watch someone do it themselves. But I've got that for every articulation. Now, what you could do if you're really clever and have enough time, I'm neither of those, kind of don't fall into either of those categories, but you could program all your software. Sorry, don't know what I'm doing there. You could program all your key switches to sit within the same regions, and then have something like an external controller that then just hits, that you can hit and, you know, pull them through. But that's another piece of kit, adds up onto that wallet, you know, and yeah, it's just something to think of. So hopefully, appreciate it's a long video, said it wouldn't be, but I'd really prefer to kind of go into detail and, you know, have you guys be clued up. If not, just having to listen to me waffling a little bit. So enjoy the video. Any questions, any tips, anything you need. Likewise, if you'd like to learn more about my profile that I've made there, I'm not going to shill and get you guys to pay for it. Just ask and I will send it over. The other thing I would ask is you send me a comment and I will make a point of getting that out to you if you think it'd be something useful. It's only going to be for BBC Symphony Orchestra Professional, so please bear that in mind. But there might be more of you users than there are commenters, probably. But yeah, thank you for watching. Hopefully this has been somewhat engaging and interesting. Obviously, I'm always looking for feedback, so please comment. You know, really, I'm quite thick-skinned. and I do this stuff because I love it. So yeah, just leave me a comment and enjoy the rest of your day wherever you are.